Welcome to my channel and welcome to the video where I will show you my Hanna Karlzon books. But honestly, for this year I don't have many achievements here. It's small progress comparing to the last year where I hadn't touched these books at all. This year I did 2 pictures, but of course it's ridiculous with the amount of books which I own and with couple of books which are still totally untouched. I have a couple of explanations why I don't color in these books more often, but we will talk about it in the end. Let's start from Midnight Masquerade, which is definitely one of my favorite books. I really love how she switched to this slightly smaller size of the book, even if paper in previous books maybe was a little bit more thick, at least English edition. But still, it's possible to use watercolors here, so any complaints from me about the paper quality. Here probably is one of my favorite works, which I managed to finish in Hanna Karlzon books, or maybe even in all my books, because here it took me some time to think about the idea, how I want to color this portrait. I was inspired by paintings by Michel Lebrun, by Marie Antoinette, French queen, obviously. So I decided that I really need to show this beautiful wig, traditional for that time, those white wigs, and a lot of decorations, all those jewelry, ribbons, flowers, and I wanted to make a very light pastel background here to emphasize a romantic look of it, and the only intense and dark area is area of her eyes and mask around them. So here I combined many art supplies. Here Derwent graphitins were extremely helpful, and also regular watercolor pencils for the background. Of course, a lot of white paint to mask all lines, because black line art didn't match my idea, and I am proud how I did skin. It's totally not visible on video, but it has nice cream, light pink, light brown colors. So for my lack of skills how to color nice skin with shading, I think that skin here looks okay. And I think that I added part of her dress because she was partly hanging in the air. Anyway, I'm quite proud of this portrait. It turned exactly like I imagined it. This year's work, it was this very simple butterfly. First, I tried slightly different colors for the background. Inner circle here, it had the same turquoise shade, but somehow it didn't work at all. It may be small difference, just one color and pleasant color, which I also used for other elements, but somehow it didn't work, this dark cobalt turquoise. When I turned it into black, everything started to look maybe 10 times better. So sometimes just one small change could totally change the final look of the page. I think that it looks quite velvety. It's a regular matte claret watercolor with very small amount of water, so it looks almost like gouache. And then I sprinkled on it with metal paints. It's metal, a light green and gold, so colors which are matching the decorations on the butterfly. And of course I enjoyed doing the main image. Here, apart from watercolors, I mostly used polychromos pencils, but I think that there are maybe a couple of Prismacolors also. I need to check, but mostly it's polychromos pencils. I somehow forgot if I ever used polychromos in this new series of books, because I had a break from coloring in it for several years. But later, when I looked at finished images here, I realized that I actually already tested polychromasis on my vampire girl, which is in the end of the book. Here, for the crown, I totally used polychromos. I actually selected this one, I remember quite well, because I really wanted to color her crown. Amazingly beautiful. She's also nice herself. I tried to mask those elements which I dislike on Karlzon portraits, all those tattoos on face. I don't like tattoo at all, so I also tried to mask them, especially on faces. For me, it's absolutely unpleasant. So, also a lot of white paint. On the air I used Prismacolor pencils, and well, cat is so. Maybe fur is a little bit flat, and maybe I had to do more bright eyes, but at least I can see texture of fur. I'm not sure if it's visible on screen, but well, it's not bad. And final picture which I have here was colored with Prismacolors. Now I can see this waxy shining which appeared after a couple of years, so maybe I need to just clean it a little bit with something. But the look of the page is quite pleasant. I always loved the combo of yellow with violet and with purple colors. They always look quite nice, but mostly I was proud of the vase. I think that it indeed looks like old bronze vase, exactly the look which I wanted to have. So even if now I can see that pencils, maybe they were, I don't know. Anyway, I would prefer to delete this waxy shining a little bit, but the page is quite lovely. And I love Midnight Masquerade. Very lovely book. And the second picture which I did this year, it was in Hexenstube. As usual, I had craziest huge plans to color for Halloween, 10 pictures as usual, but at least I finished to do something. So I did this very simple, very traditional page with a watercolor background, and surprisingly I used also Inktense pencils. Inktense were okay here, just like all water-soluble art supplies. I don't know, I have read some complaints that people can't use watercolor paints in these books, in English editions, that they bleed through. I never had such problems. I think that I even hadn't ironed this page after using water, so paper is really good. Okay, so here I used Prismacolor pencils. I decided that I need to do at least something more unusual. That's why my leaves are light gray, because I clearly imagined apples in gold and pastel colors for flowers. So traditional green totally didn't match my idea of this page. I do love how I did shining on these leaves, a little bit of gold halo from the apples. I can't say that I really love my fishes, but at least they are not lost on this page, even if they are similar in color to apples, because I added more of orange red here. It was easy and nice page, so. And yeah, when I finished this too, it really helped me to feel more confident that I can actually return to these books and my works, they won't be totally ugly. I was afraid of actually, after maybe 3 years, totally abandoning books by Hanna Karlzon. I think that in previous 3 years I did maybe 1 or 2 pictures, it was maximum. So let's have a look at the jewelry box. I even forgot English names of these books. Shame on me. But it's also one of the best books which how I rate books in my head. So for me it's one of the most interesting. Here I have this Enchantress, where I also slightly changed her bottom part of the page. She didn't have a dress, also was hanging in the air, just this jewelry here, and that was all. I decided to add a little bit of primitive dress, and again I wanted her to have a very now she has something on her nose. Okay, so I wanted Enchantress to have a very pale, almost white skin, so I deliberately did it. So I had to work hard on masking all tattoo, all stars which I had here, and even slightly changing the shape of her lips. The only element which I dislike here is that I added golden paint on her lips. Now I don't like it. But the rest of it, how I did this watercolor background, I added even some imaginary magical symbols, and on her face also, how I did their wings, maybe it's something between wing and flame. I think that everything looks quite well. Okay, let me check what else I have here. I have this picture. I think that it was somewhere at my breaking point that I started to do this page to experiment. It was acrylic inks from Daler-Rowney, and I didn't like how they behaved. Then I tried watercolors. I decided that maybe it doesn't worth to save this page, so it was a long story, and after this one I abandoned books by Hanna Karlzon. Another one where I tested Inktense, I believe, but I simply didn't like the page, honestly. I didn't like the butterfly, and I decided that if I don't like these flowers, this butterfly, why to and I don't like how I did the background, so why to continue? Here I did background with Neocolor crayons. You know that they usually create matte surface, so it's a really nice underpaint if you also want to use on top of them some shiny watercolors. I added splashes of gold here between lighter and darker areas. So when you turn your page a little bit, there is very pleasant gold shining. Again, I decided that at least for the insects, for the bees, I can use unusual color. Why not? I'm glad that here we have this red elements as one focal point, and then those violet bees. Here I have this page with very interesting experiments on the background. I mixed paints, I tried to do some experiments with plastic, which I pressed to the paper, so background looks interesting, especially if you look closer. There are some interesting stains and lines, but the image itself was quite interesting. I really enjoyed doing this glass jar. This one also was interesting, but this had more complicated structure, and it was more interesting to show all glass sizes of it. So it was lovely, and you know that I love to color birds. This one was easy to do. I added a little bit of blue, as I usually do for black feathers, so it even doesn't look very flat. Here very old works. I think that from this peacock I started my coloring in this book. Neocolors, and then Prismacolors, and a lot of white paint to make those feathers more maybe not vibrant, but at least more contrast, especially comparing to the color of the background. And here I called this lovely lady as a princess of green opals. Again, I didn't like her nose here, but I totally have no skills. I have no skills to change faces in Hanna Karlzon books, so if I don't like portrait, I have either to skip it or to forget that I don't like it and to color it somehow. I really envy those people who can change those faces and to do them in different ways. But here I love her hair, that I added a little bit of green reflections everywhere, even on her ginger hair. She has a little bit of this pale sage and a light aqua, light green, shining maybe from the jade beads which she has here, maybe from the shiny background. And I love how I did fur on cat. Yeah, there is a difference in texture between pencils and black paint which I used on the edges, but under normal light, not under electric light, you don't see such strong contrast between paint and pencils. But I think that cat, again, I experimented with adding a little bit of black grape to the black fur, and it also went quite well. Here again, one of my favorite tricks of using contrast, so very light pastel background where I used neo colors and then those warm nice colors for the fur of cat and very festive jewelry. She's really looking very royal. I love cats in Hanna Karlzon books. They always have amazing eyes, and I love how she decorates them, gives them amazing jewelry. So cats are my favorite subjects to color. It's one of my earliest portraits. After this one, after all comments which I received under my video, I almost abandoned the idea to color faces. Actually, I started to color it because of the crown. It was maybe 5 years ago. I received my Prismacolors. I wanted to practice how to color gold better, and I also received my first set of metal watercolor paints of amazing quality. It was such a great gift. I started to experiment with these backgrounds, and for the page I was inspired by fairy tale The Mistress of Emerald Mountains, so that's why I selected so many green colors, both for her background and for her jewelry. Yes, face is colored terribly, but now I normally react to it, because if you are afraid even to start, you never will have any progress. So maybe let's move to the picture which I love 20 times more. Here I'm much more confident in coloring wood, in coloring bricks, and I added them myself, because all those lovely magical bottles, they were hanging in the air, and I decided that I need to do something. So I added a couple of wooden shelves. Maybe it's some treasury of witch or treasury of some king, because bottles they are, or queen, bottles they are very precious. Maybe it's her favorite perfumes or some potions. Of course, I wanted to color each of them in different color, and apart from adding those bricks with watercolor and then shelves also with watercolor, I tried to add a little bit of a reflection. Here a little bit of green to the background around the green bottle, here a little bit of pink and magenta shining from this bottle. So it was interesting work. I had to think about many things, and even if it's old one, I am still extremely proud of this one. My favorite bottle probably is this one. Another very lovely spread. I think that the left one I did completely with polychromos pencils, mostly because I already had one peacock done with Prismacolors, so I simply wanted to try something different. But I think that I also used slate gray. Slate gray I can recognize everywhere. And here it was again interesting experiment with this background. I knew that I want very dark, almost black background to create great contrast to the magical beetle, but I still needed to add something, because simple plain black it's boring. So I added some splashes in metal green and brown color. I think that it actually looks quite nice. And of course this Prismacolor pencils for gold and for gemstone and the wings. It's this color combo, it always looks nice, so it's always a success if you select such color combo of gold, cobalt turquoise colors and dark red. Oh my god. Some experiments, but I think that it's all for jewelry box. Next I have seasons. I colored in this book mostly when I was extremely interested with experiments with shiny metal, pearlescent watercolors. And surprisingly, the biggest amount of pictures I did in winter part of the book. Many of these pictures, they have backgrounds with a lot of shiny watercolors. Here I used maybe 3 or 2 most unused colors of my Color crayons, all those green-blue colors which I never know where to use. I decided that maybe for such abstract picture I can use it, especially if on top of it I would add silver to make impression of the frozen window. I don't know what I was thinking about. So it's Color covered by quite generous layer of pearlescent silver watercolor. The rest was simple, it's just Prismacolor pencils. Picture by itself wasn't very inspiring, so I decided that craziest colors, I can justify them here. Picture on the left is one of my favorites. I always include it in my top list of finished winter pictures. It's all done with Prismacolors. I especially love gradient on the sky, so everything here is quite lovely done. I'm proud of myself, especially of the eyes of this cat. Some experiments didn't finish quite well. Some still look maybe a little bit too excessive. Technique here is the same, Colors first, but I also tried to add some kind of bouquet with Color crayons, using lighter and darker shades of yellow, yellow ochre, yellow brown colors. Color have a really nice selection in this color, so I tried to do interesting gradients here. But it wasn't enough for me, so on top of it I added also copper and golden metal paints. But at least it really helped to support the atmosphere of warm candles. So in the end I decided that if I add some colder elements like those feathers or those icy stars, it could be actually an interesting work. But some experiments failed. Here picture by itself is okay. I love how I did those more bluish pine trees, the reindeer isn't bad fur, and those ice crystals. But sometimes I complicate things too much. I wanted to do a background inspired by colors of northern light, dark blue, but with some addition of pink and green. Idea was good, but I definitely didn't have to add those very well-defined circles. I had to make maybe just to mix colors, to use watercolors, not to do those kind of bouquet background. It was too active and it definitely didn't match the idea of the winter forest, and it also messed up with the area where I also added white stars around those lanterns. So if I simply did this dark blue background, the whole page would look much more spectacular. But it taught me a lot of things, that sometimes simplicity is better. Yes, sometimes I am carried away with my experiments. Sometimes it has a good result, but I also need to be prepared to be slightly disappointed with such experiments. That was also one of the last pages which I finished in Hanna, and then I made this maybe 3 years break from coloring into her books. I love this one, but here I was so tired of masking black lines. When I started to color in her books, I didn't think about masking black lines, but then when I gradually started to see other works where people transformed line art into more painterly look where you don't see any black lines. I realized that I also prefer such style, but on Hanna works. If you start to mask all lines, you need to double amount of time you plan to spend on your page. And here I remember that, yes, I was happy how everything worked here. From the lovely couple, they trade gemstones. Mouse has ruby, and squirrel bring some emeralds to trade between friends, and many other elements I absolutely love. But it was so long story to mask all lines on the leaves, on the berries, on these tiny small mushrooms. So I simply was tired, and that's why I decided to take a break, and this break now I have for 3 years. One of my very old works, and probably one of my first portraits. I think that it was my second portrait in Hanna book. First one was in Magical Dawn. So here we have this autumn lady, and mostly I love her crown. Those leaves and berries, they were so nicely depicted by Hanna. I actually have bookmarks here. That was my first page in the whole book. Again, it was a period where I really was crazy about all metal and pearlescent watercolors, and I added them everywhere. But surprisingly here it worked. I did it with Prismacolors. I wanted everything to have more dull colors, so it's a lot of gray color, sandbar brown, green ochre, gray lavender here, and only emeralds have to be quite bright. And of course those beetles and ants which collect them. Another simple but interesting here, I really loved the look of this branch with chrysanthemum flowers. Building is also okay. The most frustrating part was to color butterflies. I remember that I did my watercolor backgrounds and I did those lovely yellow flowers. Somehow I did house, and then for several days I wasn't able to decide which color to use for butterflies. I asked everyone in my family, and in the end I decided that this dark color with some decoration of white dots, maybe this red black would be the best match here. Another one where I simply don't have any feelings toward it. Maybe now if I would mask all these lines, if I do better texture on hair, maybe if I would mask these spots better. So it's very simple, so I'm not very proud of it. Color palette is pleasant, but technique is not very interesting. And it's also one of the oldest works. Again, mix of regular and pearlescent watercolors, and then Prismacolor pencils. At that moment I really was interested in this technique. Now when I look at them, maybe this very shiny background distracts attention from the main image. I don't know, now I have mixed feelings about using so much of pearl and metal watercolors for the background. But of course it's fun during the coloring process. This one I definitely can say that with metal pearls and watercolors, when you try to mix them with the regular ones, it's always very interesting, mesmerizing to look at them. Another one done with pencils only, Prismacolors, even for the background. It's lovely, but my biggest efforts went into coloring them in such way that those flowers are not growing from their bodies, like they are sitting in flowers, and flowers they are somewhere behind them. I dislike idea of Hanna that from many of her animals there are some growing plants, flowers. For me it's slightly disgusting. It's inquieting for me, so I try to mask such areas. Hanna rabbits are not the easiest for me, cats are much easier, but here I think that they look lovely. I remember that I found very nice picture of rabbits which have those stains on them, and I used it as an inspiration. And in the end, I have several pictures where I experimented with various art supplies. Here I did watercolor icicles and a watercolor background. I didn't like it, but then I promptly saved it by sprinkling huge amount of white paint. And white paint for winter pictures, it's a lifesaver. If you are not very happy with your background, sprinkle a lot of white and say that everything is covered by snow. So picture was simple and I didn't expect anything very strong from it. At least I'm glad that I did this small trick that warm colors of birds, they are slightly reflecting in the eyes, so we have these small pink accents inside of the eyes, in the areas closest to the birds. Here I wanted to use my graphite pencils more frequently, and I do love those effects which they can create. I call it dirty background, but dirty in interesting style. Here I love how they created matte background with some nice gradients and pleasant stains. If you do something bright in the middle, such simple but interesting background can create good contrast. Now when I look at it, I like it, but again, why I hadn't covered lines on the leaves. If those bronze leaves would be without black lines, everything would look much more spectacular, in my opinion. I think that I simply was lazy, because I had to spend another hour on just outlining them. Sometimes I simply don't have enough patience. And here, neo color crayons background, and then some simple pencil work. It's one of the rare things where I actually did the title page in the book and where I didn't mess it up with some art supplies experiments. So at least this one has a decent first page. In summer nights I probably have my least interesting pictures. I have those mice where I wanted to do mushrooms in unusual colors and to show that maybe there are some interesting highlighted plants, but I don't like how I did fur on mice, too much Posca pen, especially white Posca. I didn't have beige Posca at the moment, so I'm not a big fan of this page. Even if the color palette is interesting, maybe I need to use it somewhere else. Where are my bookmarks? Actually, I have many warm feelings towards this book because it was my first book where I used Prismacolors. My first 3 pictures with Prismacolors when I finally was able to purchase them. Oh well, it was huge step forward for me in my coloring. When I just first tested Prismacolor pencils, I fell in love and I realized that I never tried something similar. All my pencils which I've tried before, there are nothing comparing to Prismacolors, and my first 3 pictures with Prismacolors, they were those sunflowers. When I blended them here without any visible pencil strokes, I was extremely happy. Then I did this one because I love to color Hanna berries. They always are lovely. And the third was this winter building where I also wanted to color berries. And after that I realized that Prismacolors probably always will be my favorite pencils. But at the same time, I have many abandoned pictures here. Here I tried Derwent color softs. The whole page is done with color softs, apart from the small circles which I did with soft pastel. Here, I don't even want to tell about it. It's very simple. Here I wanted to cover it with another paint on top and then trying to delete part of the paint so the red would be visible, but then I decided that I'm somehow not very interested in continuing these experiments. And I have another similar page here, also with some red background. I started to blend colors. Then I decided that I actually don't want to color the spider. But I love these fishes again, mostly because of the very successful contrast which always work, yellow, orange together with blue, and especially with blue background, it always looks nice. Here again, it was a moment when I discovered how well a white Prismacolor works on dark colors. Those beautiful highlights on dark red, on dark violet. It was a moment of huge discovery. Maybe for other people it sounds stupid, but I've never saw such a nicely working white pencil, and that was the flowers where I first tried it. Background here, it's crazy. I think that I was a little bit mad when I did this background. And yes, I think that that's all for the summer nights. Here I tested some pencils as usual. Now we go maybe to the daydreams. Unfortunately, when I got daydreams and summer nights, I already saw many pictures done by other people during previous couple of years. So many pictures like this one, they were so extremely popular, so I saw 20-30 finished works, and it was really very difficult to find my own way to color at least something here. So I mostly colored less popular pictures. But many of them are nice, and many of them I used when I just learned the best Prismacolor combos. Here I can definitely recognize salmon pink with great lavender and peach. So I have many warm memories about this Daydreams book also. That was extremely popular page. And first I waited until I get Prismacolors, and then I already colored it many times with my eyes, so in real life I hadn't started it. Again, it's one of my very old works with Prismacolors when I tested their various shades of cool gray, warm gray, French gray. Here it was budget pencils, that's Colleen and maybe a couple of color softs. I hadn't had Prismacolors yet. Here again some experiments. This one I did with Inktense. Acrylic background and then some shiny paint to make some magical background behind the squirrel. I think that squirrels in Hanna books, they always are great. Also Colleen's and color softs probably. This one I love. I think that it's one of my most interesting, my best works. You know that I don't very frequently work in dark colors and in limited color palette, so I'm quite proud of myself when I managed to do such things. So this one I totally love, my Moon Rabbit. And I have another one with fish, which I also love. Not this one. It's lovely, but very childish. It's also one of the old works. Here, I really love this fish. Of course, I looked at a reference picture to see how beautifully mixed different colors together with black on the bodies on fishes. So it was really interesting, and it's all Prismacolor pencils. I didn't want to have a lot of those bubbles, air bubbles on the background, so I tried to mask them as much as possible. Here I experimented with background of the sea foam. Well, it was interesting, but I don't like how I did crap. Color combo is totally unsuitable, so background is okay and gemstone is okay, but not the crap. Many pictures also so old that I don't remember what I used. Prismacolors probably and soft pastel. Think that it was Faber-Castell school pencils together with color softs. Here Inktense probably. Another one where I decided that I don't want to continue because I don't like the background. It was the first page where I discovered that I can use watercolor here. I saw a video on YouTube. I don't remember who was the blogger, but I am extremely grateful that I saw. Oh my god, they are using watercolor for the backgrounds. It's so helpful. And I also tried in my edition, and yeah, paper was great for watercolor background. That's all. Maybe actually those crowns I still want to color. They are very lovely. And finally, the book where I have biggest amount of pictures, but at some moment I simply lost my coloring mojo to do something here, and now if I want to continue I mostly look at the last books, all those Hexenstuga, Midnight Masquerade, so they are more Forest Kingdom, they are somehow more interesting for me. Okay, let's have a quick look, but of course if you follow my channel for several years you saw those pictures many times already. For many pictures I used watercolor for the backgrounds and pencils, but I love this book because I had a lot of experiments here with backgrounds. Here I did this watercolor mosaic background, very interesting. Here I have my Aquarius girl. One of my best works with animals. I do love this angel cat. It's neo colors and then huge amount of pearl and metal watercolors sprinkled on top of them. I remember how I redid this fur on the skin. First I did it in very messy ways and I had to redo it once again. Well, and of course I love eyes. A lady with pink flowers on the golden background. Those lunar beetles, which I still love. Neo colors and then Prismacolor pencils. My volcano girl. You can see that again it was a period where I added golden watercolor everywhere. Here I tried to add something for the background, but with my limited drawing skills it wasn't very easy. This one is lovely. I still love these birds. I think that it's a royal family of birds, like father, mother and their baby. Totally different color palette. It was actually very interesting to do something totally in pastel color palette. In the end, I remember that I was so tired of masking majority of those dots, which I didn't want to have here. Another crazy experiments, but I still think that it looks very nice, especially now under electric light. Everything is so shiny, all those white gold, normal gold, but on this aqua green it looks nice. Here another one which I love because of the contrast of dark and a vibrant orange red. Here is my night cat. Oh, I remember how long I worked on this fur. I still think that it's one of my best fur. It's a blend of various grays, brown and ginger colors. Maybe background here is more vibrant, but I remember that cat's fur was the most time-consuming part. Again, everything is shiny. Here I decided that I don't want to continue. Something very simple. It was one of the first works which I published on my Patreon, I think. Oh, I have such a long story already, so many years of coloring. Sometimes it's nice to look back how everything started. I would say that it's one of the most creative books I have, especially because I love how creative I was in previous years during previous years with my backgrounds. Now I mostly use pencils and I started to be less creative, definitely. I color more for my own contrast rather than for experiments. It's definitely not a good thing, but maybe it's better for my own mental tranquility. At least when I did pictures here, it always felt a little bit like a battle. You have this creative idea, you are not sure how all art supplies would behave, you struggle, you resolve problems. Now I simply color with predictable pencils. Pictures maybe are boring, but you at least can relax when you color. And it was my first portrait in Hanna. The second one was the autumn girl in Seasons, but this one was the first. I decided that as she has quite small face, here at least I can try to find a couple of colors for shading, to make a little bit of blush on her cheeks. I didn't mask those stars for the beginning because only later I purchased some acrylic paint in fair skin tone, some ivory markers. When I started I had only white gel pen and it didn't work for masking all those tattoos, stars, dots. This one is lovely and mostly because I love this berries. Very unusual, but here it definitely helps to create this fairy tale atmosphere. Another attempt to do mosaic background because apart from it picture was relatively simple, something abandoned, and still one of my best works done completely with Prismacolors where I added this Egyptian background. Quite often I myself look back at this page when I do pictures in Kerber Razanes or in other books where I have Egyptian some pictures, and I look at this background for inspiration for this sandstone with carved hieroglyphs. So I think that it was really one of my best works ever. And here I have another example of relatively successful title page. Everything looks really magical, maybe too colorful and maybe without those colorful stars on the black background everything would be better, or without those white dots. But it looks very festive. Some of the elements I love, like those bottles, jars, glass clocks and those stars. Well, so at least I colored the title page, which is a rare thing for me. Well, I hope that this video will be also helpful for myself. It reminded me that Hanna Karlzon used to be one of my most frequently used artists. Her books were quite popular, and now I definitely need to return to her books. But as I said, now I prefer her later books. As my personal punishment, I decided that I won't purchase Atlantis or book about that space city. I don't even remember the name of the book before I do normal, decent amount of pictures in Forest Kingdom, in Witch's Cottage, and in Midnight Masquerade. So wish me luck for the next year with my Hanna Karlzon books. I hope that I will be able to somehow to resolve this block. The first block is definitely because now I mostly color with pencils, and I'm totally afraid that I lost my creativity with all those watercolors with different textures, with neo colors together with pencils, with graphitins. So I need to find in me this more creative moment. And the second is that I don't know technique how I want to proceed. To mask lines with Posca marker, it's very time consuming. Not to mask line, I want like the final look of the page. So I saw that many people cover the picture with a light layer of white paint. For me it never worked. I tried a couple of times, but surface when I cover it with a light layer of white, it starts to be grainy, so I totally dislike how my pencils behave on it. Yes, white lines started to be much less contrast, but texture of this surface of the paper, for me it's unsuitable for pencils. I don't know how people do it. Even if I use a lot of water with paint, still pencils, brush strokes, they tangible on the paper, and I can't work with pencils on it. So how to mask lines without spending maybe a couple of days only to mask line art before starting to color Hanna books? It's a difficult moment, so I need to think about my technique for the next projects. But of course I hope that I will do something nice in her books during the next year. Thank you, and I will see you in my next video, where probably we will talk about my untouched books, or maybe old books which I still absolutely love but unfortunately hadn't colored during this year, but intend to color